I want to thank you all for coming because July is Dry Eye Awareness Month, and we are here celebrating dry eye awareness and advocacy. We are trying to raise awareness about dry eye disease and help people understand the complications and challenges for the dry eye community. We're going to cover a couple different things. We're going to talk about a really high level about what dry eye disease is. We have several great speakers lined up for you to talk about patient perspectives, clinical perspectives, and sort of community-wide perspectives. We'll have a couple of closing remarks, and we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. A little bit about us. We are the Alliance for Eye and Vision Research, and we are doing this briefing in partnership with the Dry Eye Foundation. The Alliance for Eye and Vision Research is a nonprofit organization that seeks to raise awareness about the importance of vision and vision research, specifically funding and support from the National Eye Institute within NIH. We try to help support the NIH and the National Eye Institute to make sure that funding and resources are available and that vision remains a top priority within NIH and for our policy initiatives in health. I want to thank our sponsors, the Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology, ARVO, the Research to Prevent Blindness, Genentech, Johnson & Johnson, Thea, and Viatris are all key sponsors of ours and supporters of this briefing, so I want to thank them. Really, really high level, what is dry eye disease? How many of you have dry eye disease that are not here with the patient group? Anybody on the staffing side? Nobody? It may be a mild form. A lot of times dry eye starts out, it can start out mild, it can start out with some irritation or dryness that can substantially increase to a much more severe form of dry eye that a lot of folks here in the room are living with. It's estimated that over 40 million Americans are living with dry eye disease. The estimates kind of vary widely, but there is a growing population of people with dry eye. A lot of that is tied to the environments in which we live, a lot more computer time and screen time, things like that, but also more awareness of the disease and a need to try to address it. So we are experiencing a rise in dry eye disease as well as a number of other vision conditions. The thing with advanced stages of dry eye disease is it can cause significant ocular pain and discomfort to the point that it really can affect people's lives in a significant way. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Current treatments include over-the-counter drops. A lot of you have probably used eye drops before. Over-the-counter, you can get those in a number of different places. We'll talk about the need for safety and efficacy in that. Please stick around and make sure you understand some of the concerns and complications around eye drops. There's a lot of safety concerns and things that way. Besides the over-the-counter eye drops, there's also prescription drops, prescription treatments, new nasal spray treatments, things like that are on the market. The access to those can be challenging. You can also look at lifestyle changes in some cases, tear duct plugs and surgeries that can help to impact people who are living with dry eye disease. It's estimated right now that dry eye disease costs about $4 billion annually to the U.S. government in terms of direct costs and indirect societal costs. And the cost is expected to surpass $60 billion when you include all of those societal costs, lost productivity and things like that in the conversation with dry eye disease. Like I said, we have some great speakers for you today, and I'm going to sit down and let the experts talk in just a moment. We have Dr. Kathy Bishop-Clark, who's going to share her personal experience with dry eye disease and chronic pain. Justin Mendelson, who's going to talk about dry eye disease and the impact on working life and things like that. We have Dr. Gloria Chu, who's going to share a little bit more about the public health concerns and outcomes and impacts of dry eye disease. Aidan Moore and Rebecca Petrus from the Dry Eye Foundation are going to speak about some of the unmet needs in the community and some of those safety and efficacy issues when it comes to eye drops, especially some of those over-the-counter concerns that are highlighted there. So I encourage you to stick around. A lot of big issues and concerns in that space. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the experts and invite Kathy up here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name's Kathy Bishop-Clark. I have been working with, dealing with, struggling with dry eyes for 25 years. And if there is one single takeaway that I ask you to walk out the door with today, from my perspective, and that's the physical pain of dry eye disease can be extraordinary. I think prior to my jumping into this world, I thought dry eyes, you just put a drop in. What's the big deal? It is so much more than that. Who I am, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I am a retired professor. I finished my career as an associate provost and dean of Miami University of Ohio. It was a university before Florida was a state. I'm an author, and I am also an athlete. I jumped into this world on a specific day, September 15th, 2000. That was 25 years ago, and it was due to LASIK eye surgery. I want to describe for you a little bit what that dry eye pain, at least for me, feels like and felt like. So to varying degrees, for 25 years, I have dealt with a real intense burning, throbbing eye sockets, swollen rims. I have, ever since LASIK, I've had facial numbness and acidic tears. Now, it's not always been super, super intense, but sometimes it has. And I hope what I want you to see is those three yellow things around there. It's constant, constant, constant. You just can't get away from it. Close your eyes, it's still there. Open your eyes, it's still there. I mean, I've broken bones before, all right? And I can take some pretty good drugs, and that takes care of the bones. I've had a child before. That hurt pretty bad, too. But this just never stops. And that, again, the pain is what I want you to see. My search for treatment has been very intense. It was especially intense from 2000 to 2010. During that time, I tried a lot of different things. Drops, punctal plugs, goggles, acupuncture, meditation, punctal occlusion, Neurontin, Lacrocerts, gels, blood serum tears. And it took me all over the United States. So I wasn't just in Cincinnati. I was looking all over for a solution. Very systematic, very deliberate. Remember, I had the surgery in 2000, so here's my plotting of pain in 2003, and here's another one in 2007. I am still plotting the pain, trying to figure out, is it the color of my socks that makes the pain flare up? You know, was it me going outside? Was it screen time? So I'm super analytical. My background's a computer scientist. And so I fed these things into models and tried to figure out what was causing the pain. I never got a good answer. Super big struggle for me is while doctors could see I did have dry eyes, what they didn't get is the pain that came with it. And I had a really hard time getting people to believe that pain. 10 years after LASIK, I found scleral lenses, which for me was a game changer. All right, it's not for everyone, but for me, that made a change. For those of you who are not familiar with that, it's like a great big lens. Mine are clear. It doesn't correct any vision. It's a great big lens that you put on your eye, and it basically protects that layer of coating that most people have naturally. 20 years after LASIK, I had restasis. Those two things have me pretty functional. I can do pretty much what I want to do. What I want to point out is both of those solutions were never suggested by doctors to me. I got those solutions through organizations like this one and through other people who struggled with this. In fact, it was advised I not do these lenses because I didn't have the tear film to support them. And I knew within days that these made such a difference for me. A typical day, it's not easy for a dry eye patient to wake up in the morning because a lot of times their eyes are kind of glued. I have to often open a little side of my eye and get a drop in just to get it to kind of lubricate so you can open it all the way. Air movement. This is a great room. There's not air movement going on right now. But any dry eye patient knows instantly. You go like this, I can feel that. Dry eye patients can feel any kind of air movement, and it's pretty intense. And I have worn goggles for 25 years. I've taught in goggles, I've presented in goggles, depending on the air. Here's a picture of all the stuff. This is what I travel with. There's a whole bunch of vials, and that's probably only 3 or 4 days worth, right? Goggles, look at all that assortment of goggles I have. Things that you have to wear to sleep, and then wind is such a big deal. So I am going to finish my blurb the same way I began. I am a mother, a wife, a professor, a dean, an author, an athlete. I have done a lot. I have a very high energy level. I'm very ambitious, and I work super hard. The amount of energy that dry eyes and pain has required of me has been phenomenal. And sometimes I wonder if I hadn't spent all that time managing dry eye pain, maybe I could have done a whole lot more. I end with my single takeaway. The physical pain of dry eye disease can be extraordinary. And I will turn it over to Justin.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Mendelson. I'm from San Diego, California. I'm 32 years old, and I've had dry eyes since I was 22. If you've never had chronic dry eye, it's hard to explain just how crippling this condition, this disease can be. You know, we heard a little bit about it just now, but, you know, in my experience, the pain sensation can vary. You know, it can vary from burning, grittiness, the feeling of sand in your eyes, to the feeling that your lids are glued to your eyeballs. You know, all the while you're just in constant pain and discomfort, and as we heard, it never goes away. My dry eye journey started back in 2010. I had just finished graduate school, and at the time I had an eye infection. I got some antibiotics, the eye infection cleared, but still something didn't feel right. And this is a very common situation for dry eye. Usually you can be sort of on the threshold and then have some sort of triggering event, and boom, now your dry eye pain has escalated. Over the next few months, contact lenses became completely unbearable for me. This was me at my first job. I could no longer wear contact lenses at all. So I became permanently wearing glasses. And I also started carrying preservative-free drops with me everywhere I went. So if you could imagine, you know, I'm buying 3 or 4 boxes of preservative-free drops. They're $25 a box. I have some vials in my desk, in my backpack, in my pocket. I'm 21, 22 years old. I'm making not a lot of money, and I'm spending hundreds of dollars a month on over-the-counter drops and treatments. It's a difficult burden to bear. You know, I have some difficult memories from situations where I would be on a plane. I forgot my drops. I'd fall asleep. And the feeling that my lids were glued to my eyeballs is not an exaggeration. I would stumble past maybe the stewardess to the bathroom to splash water on my eyes just so that I could open them again. And this is not uncommon for people who suffer from dry eye. And then in 2020, I hit rock bottom with my pain. I was working from home. I was working for Facebook at the time. I was looking at a computer screen about 10 hours a day. I was looking at my phone the other hours. I was looking at a TV, watching Netflix. You know, none of us could leave the house. So you're looking at a screen for almost all of your waking hours. But all of those waking hours were incredibly difficult for me. I was putting in eye drops about every 15 minutes just to get through the day. And if you could imagine how difficult that is, nighttime was worse. So this is a picture of me experimenting with something called moisture chamber goggles, because at night my eyelids would be so dry on top of the surface of my eye that it would feel like my eyeball was being scratched constantly, and I would wake up every few hours just to put in drops so that my eyes would be have enough lubrication so that I could go back to sleep. So this is sort of a DIY solution to try to trap moisture as much as possible around the ocular area in order to maintain the proper amount of lubrication that you need to be able to sleep comfortably. So as you can imagine, this is a tough situation for, at this point, I was about 31 years old. Dry eye, unfortunately, is a degenerative condition that will never go away. So I'm 31 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to get to 40? How am I going to get to 60 if I'm barely able to function and live my life? So that rock bottom was a turning point for me. I'm an engineer and an inventor, and so one of the things I started doing and committing myself to was designing my own solutions to help my problem. This is actually another DIY solution that I designed to heat the lids to allow oils to flow a little bit better, to coat the surface of the tear film. But it was a difficult road. I to this day, see my ophthalmologist about 4 times a year. I've had all 4 tear ducts permanently cauterized shut so that I have more tears to coat the eye. I do a procedure called IPL, and I'm going to be doing that about once a year for the rest of my life. That costs about $2,000 out of pocket. And I spend hundreds of dollars a month on drops, treatments, and I have probably some of the best health insurance that you can get in the US. So it's an incredible burden, and I would say, for context, I budget about $10,000 a month out of pocket expenses per year on managing my dry eye. This is another photo of me. Dry eye is very common. You'll hear from patients. It's walking a tightrope. So you're trying to balance neuropathic pain, you're trying to balance tear film stability, and then you have side effects of different treatments and prescriptions. So this was an intense lid inflammation and irritation. That was a side effect of one of the treatments that I was doing. But thankfully today, now, through a lot of treatments that I've kind of designed myself, and a lot of care providers that I've seen that have helped me design my own protocol, I'm relatively able to function and get through the day and be here to talk to you. And honestly, I started looking at my dry eye like a terminal cancer diagnosis. It's that level of severity for many and millions of people in the United States. And it needs to be treated as seriously. So one of the things that I want to really land with you here today is that this is a significant concern. I see it as, frankly, an epidemic. We look at screens most of the waking hours of our day. And a fact that a lot of people don't know is you blink 40% less when you look at a screen. When you blink less, you distribute tears less over the surface of the eye, which creates inflammation, which will eventually create dry eye. So we're seeing an explosion of people who are being diagnosed with dry eye disease at the age of 20, 23, 24, that have no idea where to turn. And in many parts of our country, the healthcare system doesn't have a lot of specialists that have awareness of how to treat this complex disorder. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk, is that we need to shift the narrative. We need to make it clear that dry eye is not a mild inconvenience. It's not something that you just say, hey, go buy some drops and you'll feel better. And I want to advocate for earlier intervention, for better treatment options, and more support for the millions of people that are being diagnosed with this disease every year so that they can get the treatment that they need. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a little short, so hopefully you can still see me above this screen here. Thank you all for being here. My name is Dr. Gloria Chu, and I'm an optometrist, and I practice at the USC Roski Eye Institute in Los Angeles, California. We've already heard 2 very powerful statements from patients today, and I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a different perspective as an optometrist, an eye care provider who sees these patients on a daily basis, and build on the momentum that we have already started on our topic for today and for this month. Why does dry eye matter? So I wanted to start out with asking, how many of you have used artificial tears before for yourself? Okay, about 75%. And how many of you wear contact lenses for one reason or another, for vision or for dry eye? So maybe half of you. So you already have some experience with dry eye yourself when your tear film is being disrupted. I'm going to share some cases from patients that I have seen. So this is a very kind, wonderful young woman in her 20s who was diagnosed with leukemia. She had a stem cell transplant, and following that treatment, developed severe dry eyes related to something called graft versus host disease. She came from Washington State, so she was not local, but she had tried numerous drops, treatments, medications from her local doctors, and ended up with me being evaluated for scleral contact lenses. These are not easy lenses to use by any means. It's a process. It requires training, effort, time, and funding. So here she is learning how to put her lenses on, and she sent me a bunch of pictures from her journey in Los Angeles, trying to get her lenses in the bathroom, over the sink. And we see on these pictures on the right, when the eye is dry and you use a microscope or a slit lamp, you use some vital dyes, and that highlights areas that have been compromised. And with scleral lens wear, as well as other treatments, we can see healing of the ocular surface, the bottom picture below. Here's another very striking image of tattoos from one of my patients. You can see this is an eye. It's not a heart. It's not his girlfriend, mom, a skull. It's an eye with tears bleeding out of it. And on his other arm, he has this symbol that says SJS and the date in which he was impacted by this life-threatening condition. He took a medication that triggered a hypersensitivity reaction in his body. Put him in the hospital, his skin became blistered, and he survived this experience, but was left with chronic changes to his ocular surface. Here is another one. You may think, gosh, I never knew eyes were so popular for tattoos, but you can see the agony and the impact that dry eyes has also left on this patient who didn't want to forget this experience. This is also another patient who experienced SJS. Bleeding, blood coming from his eyes. And if you just need to know, oh, how did dry eyes affect you? Can't you just go to the store and get some non-preserved artificial tears? No. These patients are remembering this chronic disease constantly. Here is another young patient who I started seeing at 8 years old. She was born without an eyelid. So this isn't something she did, but because she didn't have an eyelid, her eye is chronically exposed to the air and the elements. She had dry eye from birth. She had multiple surgeries in her first few months of life, and she now has a reconstructed eyelid, but as you can see, there are some cosmetic challenges. Her eyelid also still does not close fully. So I helped her with scleral lenses, which helps to protect the ocular surface during the day, to prevent further inflammation and help with the comfort and the vision as well. Here is another picture. I know this is a little bit more graphic, but this is a 9-year-old boy who is also, due to his systemic disease, developed severe dry eye, corneal scarring, blood vessel growth, and all of these inflammatory changes lead to physical changes on the eye that impact vision and obviously comfort. So this little boy has tried all kinds of things. He is on eye drops every 30 minutes, has been on topical steroids for many years, and this isn't a quick fix. This isn't something that he can go and get a treatment and he will be fine. He's already learned how to use Braille, and this little boy with his dry eyes, this will change what career he goes into and change who he can become as an adult. So there are so many aspects on the ocular surface around the eye that contribute to a healthy functioning eye. And our goal is that you don't think about your eyes. You want to be able to walk around, do your work, go to your job, see your family, and not think about your eyes and not have to worry about, oh, where are my drops? I need it because my eyes are burning. So we need all of these things to function well together so that the proper tear components can be present, so our cornea can be protected, so we won't be in pain. All of these play a role in ocular health, comfort, and vision, and when any one of these pieces is missing, whether it's due to your environment, whether it's due to the medications you're on, a surgery you had, a systemic disease that you're suffering from, it leads to challenges. Believe it or not, the tear film, it's a very, very thin layer just on the outside of your eye. You'd think, gosh, how important can this little layer of liquid be? Very important. When your tear film is disrupted by outside components and you're not getting tears produced by the lacrimal gland, and any of these three layers are affected, this is where you will start to feel discomfort, pain, and where your quality of vision and quality of life will be impaired. So what are we doing about this today? Why does dry eye matter? Even if you don't suffer from dry eye yourself, I guarantee you that you as a member of society are being impacted by dry eye. So much that there is a group called the Tear Film and Ocular Surface Society, and they have come together for 20 years now. Their first report was about 20 years ago in 2007. It was updated 10 years later in 2017, and fortunately this group met last year, end of 2024, and just in May have started coming out with new publications about diagnosis, management, and treatment for dry eye disease. We had 80 experts from 18 countries around the world meet in Italy, I believe, to brainstorm about what is being done. What have we learned from our patients? What's working? What's not? What do we need to do better to help these patients? This is a nonprofit organization created to advance research, literacy, and education about the tear film and ocular surface. And they use an evidence-based approach, and they really focus on collaboration among different scientists, eye care providers, optometrists, and ophthalmologists. They've come to realize that patient symptoms are very important. So many times we use surveys in clinic to get a subjective report of how patients feel. Because dry eye disease is different. It's not a disability that you can often see. They're not in a wheelchair. They may not have a broken arm or leg. Their eyes may not even look red to you. But these patients feel it on a constant basis. So it might be invisible to the public, but certainly not invisible to the patient. There are so many different symptoms and signs, and believe it or not, there are also dry eye cases where the doctors don't see anything, and patients are just trying to convince their provider that they're uncomfortable and in pain, and it's sometimes hard for doctors to make that connection because they don't see anything wrong with the equipment. And it's because the nerves within the cornea is one of the most highly innervated tissues in the body. Imagine getting a piece of, like an eyelash or a piece of sand at the beach in your eye. It feels like glass, right? Imagine if you have dry eye impacting this tissue, highly innervated with these nerves. So there are people who have signs that you can see, people who don't have signs, and again, we have all different causes of dry eye. And in one of the reports in the DEWS 3, they look at diagnostic methodology. In clinic, we use a lot of different tools and stains to try to highlight what part of the ocular surface or tissue or tear film is affected. And it's important that we not only take your symptoms into account, but also what is present when we look at your eyes. There's so much that these reports went into. The DEWS 3 reports, I think there was maybe like 3 publications that have come out so far. They're all hundreds of pages long. So that already speaks volumes, and to the degree of investigation and research and time and resources that are needed to further understand this condition. So I also wanted to kind of throw out some studies that have shown evidence of how dry eye has impacted patients on a daily basis. We all know that time and money are important. So that's what these studies focus on. We've already heard from our 2 speakers today, the time, the artificial tears, the lenses they have to buy, the extent of designing your own warm compress. I don't know how much money that took, but this is a study that was published in 2024. It was a survey-based study by the SCOPE group, which is called the Scleral Lenses and Current Ophthalmic Practice Evaluation Group. There were over 600 respondents, 84% from the US and the majority female. They reported that the out-of-pocket treatment cost annually ranged from $200 to $1,300. Now, I feel that that is kind of a low number, but maybe in this specific group that was surveyed, this is what they reported. But I know for a fact that if you're doing any out-of-pocket procedures, including IPL or LipiFlow or any of these heated expression lid treatments, those are out of pocket and start usually at about $1,000. Scleral lenses as well, the cost for the fitting and the lenses themselves can be thousands of dollars as well. So in addition, the time, 22% spent 1 hour or more dealing with the dry eye. And this is whether these were new disease or very long-term chronic disease. These patients are spending a lot of time every day to address dry eye disease. And this was a very interesting report come out. It took data from actually a long time ago. So back in 2003, this is a review article out of the US, it reported that dry eye disease interfered annually with just leisure activities on 123 days out of the year. 360 days, that's 30% of your days that you're impacted just doing things maybe outside of work. In terms of work, patients missed 5 days of work, and not only that, they worked over 200 days with symptoms. So are our dry eye patients being effective at work? Maybe, maybe not. In a study that came out in 2011, again, they looked at annual cost, and average was about $780 per person, and even more for the more severe patients. And in terms of the overall burden for dry eye disease, this was back in 2011, it was almost $4 billion. Not only the burden for the U.S. healthcare system, but think about the indirect cost to us as a society in the U.S. It's over $11,000 per patient and over $55 billion overall. If people aren't productive, if they're skipping days at work, they're not going to get the job done that you need to function in your own lives. So, in conclusion, I hope that you already understand now that we need to do better. We've been studying dry eye disease, the mechanism, treatments, experiments for decades now. We have people, scientists devoting their whole life to finding cures to alleviate dry eye symptoms. And we also have to remember how complex this is, because dry eye stems from so many different things. It's not just because you're on a screen and not blinking enough. It can be from disease. It can be a birth defect. It can be from a surgery that you had that you weren't expecting these complications. And you can see various pictures here of how the cornea and the tear film can be compromised, even with scleral lens wear. Your surface can be so dry that that it creates a film and a coating that obscures your vision and requires constant maintenance throughout the day. So thank you for your attention, and I'm going to turn it over to Aiden.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Aiden Moore, and I am the Executive Director of the Dry Eye Foundation, as well as a co-founder. And I'm excited to be joined today by around 30 patient advocates and volunteers. And we're about halfway through our Patient Advocacy Day for Dry Eye, and it's the first time we've ever done this. So thanks to all the advocates. They're wearing name tags, so please talk to them if you have a chance. I'd also like to say thank you to Neighbor for organizing today. The Dry Eye Foundation is a small nonprofit located in Paulsbo, Washington, that was started in 2018. We bring together the experience of doctors who have been treating dry eye and patients who have been living with it for decades. We operate community support groups, education, and advocacy programs for patients across the world. We moderate 2 Facebook groups with almost 20,000 users and help around 300 people each year on our Zoom groups and Dry Eye Helpline. In my interactions, I've learned that dry eye is a misnomer. It isn't just as simple as using drops, as we've heard today. There's a large market for dry eye treatments, but patients still struggle to find relief. Doctors have tended to separate dry eye disease from the symptoms and assume that treating the disease will resolve the symptoms, but this isn't always true. Many patients really have chronic eye pain, and I think we've all heard the word pain a lot today. This kind of pain is constantly at the front of your mind. It can feel like you have sand or glass in your eyes. You can't tolerate wind or AC or even bear to go outside. People tell me that they feel like someone's poking them in the eye with something sharp, with a knife, even around the same time every day. They get so nervous that their pain is going to come back at 3 p.m. every day, and it takes a huge toll on these individuals. So I challenge you today to reach out to a patient and ask them what their most severe symptoms are like. As we've heard, people can get dry eye from all sorts of reasons that kind of layer on top of each other and compound, and it can be complicated to get relief. You have to try multiple treatments, oftentimes paying out of pocket, while you're still dealing with the pain. So you're in pain and waiting and trying and tweaking the tiniest things to figure out what's going to work over a number of years, as we heard from Dr. Bishop Clark. And oftentimes, as we've heard, it's hard to get doctors to take you seriously. And you can feel like you're the one driving your treatment, you're doing your own research online, you're reaching out to patients, and you're even suggesting what you try next to your doctor. So personally, I've learned to adopt a chronic pain model for dry eye. Something that has such a profound life impact needs more than just medical attention. So people come to the foundation feeling overwhelmed, anxious about the future, and misunderstood when nobody understands how dry eye can control their entire life. You can see here on the slide how patients we surveyed reported being less productive at work, being uncomfortable during daily activities of living, and being worried about the future of their symptoms. These are all things that we've heard about from the presenters earlier. And I'm very, very, very in love with my job, and I get to hear the relief in people's voices when they find the foundation and learn that there are other people out there experiencing what they're going through, because it can be very lonely. And at the foundation, we have the experience of seeing thousands of patients get out of this crisis mode, and they can get more comfortable, their pain is reduced, and they can have more control over their lives. So we have a lot of experience helping people through this program, so it's positive. And we walk alongside patients to listen, validate their experience, and figure out what the next steps they're going to take. When your life is so impacted, when everything shuts down, it can be hard to just find one thing, focus on the next step, one foot in front of the other, rather than how am I going to live the next 5 decades of my life. That just nobody can deal with that scale. And there's also many non-medical strategies for pain management that patients don't hear about from their doctors, and they only learn by talking to each other. They learn 10 years later. They learn online on a Facebook group or a YouTube video. So we exist to connect patients so they can get help faster, get relief faster. And so some of our programs, just briefly, we hold several support group meetings each month. I'm honored to be in the room with some of the support group members today that I've known for years. And I believe these groups are important to patients because it's so rare to meet someone else with dry eye in your life. And people keep coming back for the sense of connection because they're able to get answers to those practical questions that it could take 6 months to get an appointment with your doctor, or the doctor may not know how to address this at all. And the support group members are able to support people like themselves. So my takeaways for you today are that dry eye disease deserves to be researched and taken seriously. It's only going to become more of a problem for all demographics in this country as long as we continue to use our screens, medications, undergo procedures and surgeries, and would also say that the signs of dry eye are increasing in pediatric populations as well. My second ask is that, or my second takeaway is that ocular surface pain can be an invisible illness to those around you and sometimes even to doctors. Dry eye sufferers sometimes live with constant eye pain that affects their ability to function and feel confident in life. Many patients do get better, but the dry eye experience needs to be recognized and it deserves to be discussed in events like these. So we've coached all of our patient advocates today to make some asks in their meetings with their representative. I will go over two of those. And the first one is that we need patient priorities to be considered in dry eye research. And we can't hope for this research to get done without a fully funded and independent National Eye Institute. And the longer we wait to do this research, the bigger this problem is going to become for individuals and the country as a whole. The second ask we have today is for access to FDA-approved treatments. Patients face significant significant access barriers to treatment, from high out-of-pocket costs for OTC drugs and cash pay procedures to high copays or lack of prescription coverage. Congress can support expedited CMS approval of ocular surface therapeutic drugs and devices that demonstrate efficacy for patient-reported symptoms. We also struggle to know just how many patients in the U.S. have dry eye, and we'd like to see the Government Accountability Office report on the utilization of dry eye drugs and devices. So we've heard from individuals and a doctor today, and I hope we can shed light on the experiences and the needs of the dry eye community that I encounter personally every day. And so for more about our third ask, I will turn it to Rebecca for a presentation on eye drop safety. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your interest in eye and vision research and dry eye disease specifically. So we're going to shift gears now and talk about a safety problem. We've heard everyone explain that eye drops don't solve our problem. We're so far beyond that. The flip side of that, though, is we all do use eye drops, and we need them. We depend on over-the-counter drops for our quality of life. And we have lots of different options. There are hundreds of over-the-counter drops available in the U.S., both brand names and generic ones. We need them to be readily available, and we need them to be safe. So that's why they matter to us. Why should they matter to you? Well, at least 15% of American adults are using over-the-counter eye drops of some kind. That's a conservative number. Starts with 25 million using lubricant drops and another 10 million plus using redness relievers. These are just really recognizable brand names. There's a lot left out of those numbers. We used to be able to rely on these over-the-counter drops to be safe. What made them safe? Well, there weren't very many, and there weren't very many companies making them. And the ones that were making them were household names, generally big pharma companies. Not that that's a guarantee of safety, but they would be, let's say, very motivated to not screw up some small part of their business, which would have a bigger effect on their broader pharma business. The other thing with the large pharmas is if something goes wrong, we at least know where they are. So we knew our drops were safe. Second aspect of it is eye drops all used to be preserved. And preservatives in eye drops have a key role of preventing them from becoming contaminated after you start using them. You buy your drops, you open it up. Most people are not always going to wash their hands every time they open a bottle of drops or a vial. The preservative then helps neutralize any bacteria that are introduced to the bottle after you start using it. And imagine a case where bacteria were introduced during the manufacturing process. A preservative in the bottle would also help deal with that, so you don't have bacteria brewing in it. So they were safe until they weren't. In 2022 and 2023, there was an eye drop catastrophe that left 4 people dead and 18 blind across more than a dozen states. Up until then, nobody really believed an eye drop could hurt you. You buy an eye drop, worst case, it bothers my eyes, I don't like it, I throw it away, no big deal. But this changed everything. The idea of going blind, let alone dying, was just unthinkable. That ushered in a new era. This EsriCare tragedy was not a standalone freak accident. It was just the most visible instance of a much broader problem. As you can see from these numbers, we are now in an era when we cannot take over-the-counter eye drop safety for granted. Just in the last 2.5 years, 67 different eye drops have been recalled. Those are only the ones that there were public notices about. There are other classes of recalls that are not publicly announced. Many more eye drops have been implicated in FDA public warnings or warning letters to manufacturers and distributors of eye drops who failed to ensure that sterile manufacturing procedures were followed. So what changed? How did things become more dangerous? First, the market has gradually shifted to preservative-free products. That's natural. We want our drops to be preservative-free. We want more natural drops. We don't want chemicals in them that could harm us. That's especially important for people with dry eye. We don't want the preservatives. But that means we are much more dependent on the quality of manufacturing. Making preservative-free eye drops is not a task for amateurs. Keeping those clean rooms clean is not cheap, it's not easy, it requires major investment, and the standards are very, very high. Companies that go into this kind of business casually are not making sterile eye drops. They are making eye drops that have got some kind of bacterial or fungal contamination in them. When we buy those eye drops, we are paying for the privilege of dripping bacteria on our eyes. And then we're just depending on a strong immune system to deal with it. So the second contributor to eye drop safety issues that have escalated is we're no longer buying our eye drops in drugstores. Maybe we start out at Walgreens, but those of us who are using eye drops regularly, sooner or later we end up buying them online. Once upon a time, this is how eye drops moved around the world, the country. Reputable drug manufacturer is packing them up and shipping them to a big distributor. McKesson, Cardinal, you've probably heard names like those. And they ship them to pharmacies or healthcare facilities. And that's how they get into my hands and your hands. This used to be true for all drugs, both prescription and over-the-counter, but it's changed for the OTCs. Today, thanks to e-commerce, everybody on the planet has access to Amazon's warehouse, my mailbox, and they can send me eye drops. That includes the legitimate manufacturers. It also includes scam artists and everybody in between. In the past 3 years, we've been seeing this escalating flood of scary eye drops sold online. In 2023, Dry Eye Foundation reported more than 200 eye drops to the FDA just in that 1 year. They're like the ones you see on the slide. Counterfeits, clones, contaminated drops, misformulated things, expired products, recalled products. And these garbage eye drops are just mixed into everything else. It can be very difficult to tell them apart. So hang on, what about regulation? Isn't somebody in charge of doing something about this? Yes, all eye drops are drugs, right? That's how they're legally classed, whether they are prescription or over-the-counter. If it is sold with the intent that I am going to dribble it into my eye, it is a drug. And it has to be sterile. There are laws for that about the manufacturing requirements. But if you look at the difference in regulation between prescription and OTC, it is stark. So we've got this 2 million people roughly that are using a dry eye prescription drug. And there is this enormous regulatory burden on the prescription drug manufacturers, and rightly so. We want those safe, and we are not worried about people using prescription dry eye drugs going blind. But when you look at the OTC side, 35 million and more people using over-the-counter eye drops, and there is astonishingly little standing between them and getting a Pseudomonas infection that could take out an eyeball. Over-the-counter drug regulation literally works on the honor system. It is a, here's the rules, please follow them, we hope you will, and not much beyond. The regulations were written long before e-commerce, and they were designed for an era with a small number of relatively trustworthy manufacturers. E-commerce has just left that whole system in the dust. And then the pandemic came along and it amped everything way up. It made us need more eye drops, and it made all these creepy characters come out of the woodwork that were happy to contribute to the supply. Today, anybody can commercialize an eye drop, and they are. You can make an eye drop in your basement, and you can sell it on Amazon. If you're smart about the packaging and marketing, people might not know the difference. So on the one hand, we've got this steeply growing demand for eye drops. We've heard about the numbers of people with dry eye growing all the time. And on the other, we've got no constraints on the distribution side, online. And that means everybody wants a piece of that business. So on this list, we've got, among the supposedly legitimate players, the companies that have names and addresses. An awful lot of them are amateurs. On this slide, you can see the FDA warning letters from just the last 12 months to eye drop manufacturers and distributors. And in many cases, these letters were the result of the company's first inspection, which came years after they started selling the drops. These things called FDA warning letters, they are not like casual nasty grams from the FDA. They're typically the culmination of a long back and forth between the FDA and the company after an on-site inspection. And when the company stonewalls the FDA too long, the FDA eventually escalates the legal enforcement process. The businesses that these letters are going to are anything from generic manufacturers that are cutting corners to national drugstores that fail to carefully choose and monitor contract manufacturers. From the FDA's perspective, we think this process is like whack-a-mole. But believe it or not, these are the good guys because we know their names and addresses. FDA can find them. Then we've got the dark side, also known as Amazon. And of course, Amazon sells all of the good ones. But as I mentioned, they also have all these garbage ones mixed in. This is a handful of samples. Everything on this slide I got from Amazon Hot New Releases list for dry eye last Sunday. They blend in, they look respectable, they have nice labels, they have tons of reviews. I mean, Esricare, the one that caused death and blindness, had about 3,000 reviews on Amazon. You can see from my descriptions on here, they are things we don't know where they came from. We've got honey eye drops coming from China, very trending. Eye color changing eye drops. There are millions of TikTok video hits on the eye color changing theme. We've even got an outright counterfeit of the Bausch & Lomb Lumify drop. Right there, just being openly sold on Amazon. From a safety perspective, what I would most want you to take away from this is that an eye drop of unknown origins, where we don't know where it was made, we have to assume it's contaminated. Nobody who has the wherewithal to correctly manufacture these drops is doing so in the dark. Anybody making that investment is marketing it under a reputable brand name. The companies selling these things on Amazon have unbelievable marketing sophistication. They move super fast. They catch every trend. And our medical advisor, Dr. Brown over here, actually identified 3 different ways that the Chinese eye drop companies are manipulating the FDA's drug listing system to get drug codes that will help them bypass the filters on the e-commerce sites. This one really touched my heartstrings particularly. One of the newest and most troubling trends that we're seeing right now on Amazon is unsafe products that are specifically being manufactured to exploit shortages of products that are sold to patients in orphan disease groups within our dry eye community. This is a saline sold for, since we've had a lot of talk about scleral lenses today, it's used to fill scleral lenses. We had a recall of one product, which caused a shortage across other brands. And then all of a sudden, this product showed up. And then when one of the other brands ran out, they jacked the price twice as much. And there's no information on the box to show where did this come from, who do I call if I have a problem. It's on sale right now. You can look that one up on Amazon. So 2.5 years ago, Dry Eye Foundation started calling this trend the flood of crap. And we created a new program to see what we could do about it. We've been tracking and researching like crazy. We've worked to raise awareness amongst consumers and doctors. We launched our own publicly searchable database. You can look up warnings and recalls and information on 800 different eye drops. We even made our own fake eye drop for educational purposes to prove how easy it is to fake out the FDA's drug database. It's called Mermaid Tears. There's a QR code if you want to read about it. And we've been sharing our research with the FDA. Our last meeting with the FDA's drug division about these trends was 1 week before they lost all the staffing for the communication offices that facilitated our interactions with them. So at the end of the day, we're just this teeny-weeny little nonprofit trying to clean something up, right? A couple weeks ago, I was talking with a class action attorney friend in Philadelphia who specializes in medical product problems. And we were chatting about the Amazon problem. And he said to me, Rebecca, trying to deal with Amazon is like shouting at the ocean. I was like, okay. That may be so, but can we find a way to clean up this one little tide pool with bad eye drops? That's my hope, my ambition. So 2 asks today for safety, and they're the same ones that I had at this briefing last year, actually. First of all, can you support the FDA's work to try to keep OTC drugs safe? From time to time, they have proposals about areas where they need new regulations to give them the authority to enforce existing rules. For example, they wanted to be able to require new OTC drop manufacturers to wait for a facility inspection before they bring their products to market. We think that's pretty reasonable. We'd like you to support proposals like that. Last, can you investigate the Amazon problem? Eye drops are drugs. They have to be sterile. Amazon thinks they're widgets. And they're not deterred, even by lawsuits about eye drops that have caused death or blindness. So Dry Eye Foundation is asking you to please investigate this issue and find ways to keep our eye drop supply safe. Over to you, Dan.
We're right at the end here, so I want to thank everybody for sticking around and hearing about this issue and about the needs of the community. I want to thank our sponsors again for all of their support and helping making today's event possible. There are a couple of things that you can do to help, and both Aiden and Rebecca touched on some of those things, but support the National Eye Institute, support research that looks at dry eye disease, looks at new treatments, new methodologies, and ways that we can help support this community from a patient-centered approach. Join the Vision Caucus. That's a really easy one for all of the offices. It's a bipartisan caucus here in Congress. Both Gus Bilirakis and Mark Vesey are the chairs of that caucus. I encourage you all to check and see if your member is a member of that caucus or not, and join that caucus so you can find out more about vision issues. Support some of these needs with the FDA and support some of the safety and efficacy issues around over-the-counter treatments. Support research that can help identify and address ocular pain. Those are all areas that you can help support some of that. The last piece is support early detection. There is a bill in the House. It is not in the Senate, but it is in the House, H.R. 2527. That bill would help to improve early detection of vision conditions within children. Not specific to dry eye, it's sort of a broader issue, but you're hearing now that you're seeing dry eye in pediatric population and younger adults, and so early detection is key to try to help treat that. This bill would help do that as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time. I want to thank everybody, all of our speakers for their stories and their experiences, and again, thank our sponsors for helping make today possible. I'll open it up to questions, although I know we are right at time, so appreciate your time today. Any questions? All right. Well, if you do, feel free to stick around. And thank you again for your time.